Hello everyone, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2008 Dodge Sprinter with a 3.0 liter. The complaint on this Sprinter is the check engine light remains on the dash and the vehicle is losing power tremendously. The engine goes into a limp mode intermittently. So the vehicle was brought to us so that we can figure out what's causing that. I scanned the vehicle off camera. I'm going to show you the trouble code that we have in the engine computer, and then I will tell you what you have to do to fix this problem. Here are the trouble codes that we have in the engine computer. The first trouble code is 2359, and it says charge pressure control, charge pressure too high. And then the second one is 2510, boost pressure regulator, control positioner error. Now, 90% of the time when I see these two trouble codes set together in the engine computer, the problem ends up being a defective actuator on the turbo. This pressure regulator that the computer is listing here is actually the actuator on the turbo. Okay, so since the regulator has an error, we're gonna have to go to the actuator and check the actuator wiring. If the actuator wiring is good, then the problem is going to be the actuator itself. So if you see these two trouble codes, your problem might be the actuator, but before you replace the actuator, test the wiring first. And testing the wiring on this actuator is really easy. I'm going to show you that next. Hey, hold on. If you're not a subscriber to this channel, I have a favor to ask you. I want you to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. Smash the like button. I would really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now let's continue with our video. Here is our turbo actuator. You just need a test light to test the wiring of the turbo actuator. We're going to connect our test light to ground. I am going to use a back probe tool to test the wires at the turbo actuator. This actuator has 3 wires. A green wire, a brown wire, and a gray wire. Now, the green wire is going to be our power supply to the actuator. I'm going to back probe this green wire. We have to make sure that the actuator is receiving power. Since my test light is connected to ground, if I touch this back probing tool, my test light should light. And I know my test light is good, so we're going to test it first. If I touch power, my test light is going to light. So right there, test light lights. You have to do this test with the key on. The key is on in the vehicle. So I'm going to touch this back probing tool. Right there, as you can see, my test light lights. So we have power going to the actuator. Now I'm going to back probe our brown wire, which is this one. So our brown wire is going to be our ground to the actuator. Now I'm going to switch my test light to battery positive. So you don't need a fancy scan tool to do this, to test this actuator. Since my test light is connected to power, if I touch ground, my test light is going to light. So we touch ground, test light lights, so we're good. Now let's see if we have ground going to the actuator. Right there, test light lights. Okay, so we have ground on the brown wire. So our first 2 wires are good. So now we're going to test our control wire, which is the gray wire, the last wire. So I'm going to back probe the gray wire. Now this gray wire is the control wire that comes from the engine computer. The engine computer grounds the actuator through this wire to move the arm of the actuator. Okay, so at this point we're going to beat the engine computer by sending a ground on that wire. So I'm going to move my test light to battery ground. Okay, so we're going to send ground to that wire, the control wire, using the test light. When we touch this back probing tool, that arm should move if the actuator is good. So I'm going to touch this back probing tool here. As you can see, I'm touching my back probing tool, nothing is happening. So we are sending ground to the control wire, nothing is happening. So we are being the computer right now. Okay? So right there, this actuator is defective. So this is how you test a turbo actuator on a Sprinter van. Now what this actuator does is there's an arm over here that moves up and down. It moves a lever that's back here. That lever goes up and down to open and close the vanes in the turbo. When the vanes open, the turbo spins faster, which increases the amount of air that goes into the intake to increase the engine power. Okay, so this actuator is bad. I'm gonna remove my back probing tool. I'm gonna disconnect the electrical connector here. Now let's check these pins. Let's make sure that we don't have spread out pins. I'm gonna do a quick drag test. Okay, so these pins feel good. Okay, so that's fine. All right, so now what we need to do is we're gonna have to get a new actuator, and I'm sure after we install a new actuator, this vehicle is going to be fixed. I'm gonna get a new actuator and then I'll bring you guys back up. I got the new actuator from our Napa store. So here it is. Let's get it out of the box. So here is our brand new turbo actuator. So now, before we install this new one, let's do the same test we just did on the wiring to see if this arm is going to move. Okay, so I'm going to connect the electrical connector to our new actuator. All right, so we got our new actuator connected to the wiring harness. Okay, so look at this arm over here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to back probe just the control wire. We know we have good power and good ground over here. So we're just gonna back probe the gray wire, okay? Our control wire. So now watch this arm. My test light is still connected to ground. So I'm gonna send ground to the control wire. When I touch this ground, if this actuator is good, the arm of the actuator should move up and down. So I'm gonna send ground on the control wire of the actuator. Do you see that? So what I'm doing is I'm being the computer. So I am sending the control that the computer sends to this actuator to move this arm up and down to increase the boost of the engine. So right there, as you can see, we can get this actuator to move up and down, so we're good. This is how you test a turbo actuator on a Sprinter van. So at this point, what I have to do is I have to remove this old one, install this, and we should be good to go. So to get this installed, it's pretty straightforward. We're gonna have to, let me disconnect this. All right, we got the new actuator disconnected. Now we're gonna remove this old actuator so we can install our new one. To remove this actuator, we're gonna have to undo 3 10mm bolts that hold the actuator to the turbo. And these holes over here, so 1, 2, 3, these 3 holes over here are the holes for the 10mm bolts that hold the actuator to the turbo. Now there is a little linkage that connects the actuator to the turbo that connects to this arm over here, so we have to remove a little clip that connects that linkage to this arm. and that clip is back here, so I'm gonna remove that now. So here it is. This is the little clip that connects the arm on the actuator to the lever on the turbo. So I'm going to disconnect it. Okay, so here is that arm. I don't know if you can see it. Now I'm going to undo the bolts that hold the actuator to the turbo. There's a couple of them. I already did get some of these bolts loose, so I'm kind of just showing you the process of how to remove this. Removing this actuator is very straightforward. Okay, so here's one of them. I already removed the other two off camera. Okay, so it goes over here, and then here, and here. Okay, so we're gonna get the old one out of the way. Now, when you remove the old actuator, you have to make sure that the vanes in the turbo are not stuck. So you have to move this lever up and down like this. Okay, as you can see, this lever is going up and down freely, so our vanes in the turbo are not stuck. Okay, so we're good to go. So now I just have to do the reverse process of the removal process. I'm going to install this new actuator. I'm going to get all the bolts on. I'm going to tighten all the bolts. I'm going to reconnect the lever that goes on this arm. I'm going to connect it, and we should be good to go. We tested this one. This one is moving, but the old one is not moving, so this is bad. Okay, I'm going to leave this right over here. This is how you test a turbo actuator on a Sprinter van with a 3.0 liter. I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why, so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.